Welcome back for another Christian review of regular books and no spoiler review of the Broken Earth trilogy by NK Jemisen. Today we're gonna go over all three of the books. So we're gonna go over the 5th season, the Obelisk and the Stone Sky. This is the completed trilogy and I read it all over like a month and a half. If you've never seen one of these videos before, the first thing that you need to know is that I do a regular review, what you know and love to expect from a book review, and I will review each of the books separately for this one. And then I get into my Christian reviews, which is the basic piece of a book that may or may not have a fellow believer wanting to read it. You can find a video pinned at the top of this playlist, which goes over way more detail about these reviews, but for now, let's go ahead and get into my regular review. Also, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and the bell so that you can stay up to date with all of these Christian reviews of regular books because there are a lot of them, and I definitely want to be able to tell you guys about them as they come out. This trilogy came to me through a book club and I was super excited to check it out. I felt like it seemed so interesting. It's a winner of many awards and it's very, very popular. So I wanted to see what all the hype was about and to see if I enjoyed it. I tend to find that when there's books that are like very, very hyped, sometimes I do not feel the same at all. And so I was interested to check it out. I picked up the first book, which is the 5th season, and I told myself, if I don't enjoy this book, if I'm not having a good time, I'm not going to continue on in the series, even if the book club does. Like, I will just move on. And the beginning of this book, and I'd say like a good majority of this book, I struggled. I was confused. I had no idea what was happening. I really wanted to understand the storyline and the characters, but it's like multiple timelines, it's multiple voices, and I just could not figure out what was going on. I was doing an immersive read of it, and the whole time I felt so confused. Then about the last 15% of that book, it goes crazy, and all of these storylines and everything kind of converge into a very good explanation of what's happening. And then I felt like, okay, I have a good take on it. And then I went and watched videos about it and I was like, okay, I have a pretty good take on it. So I felt like I could continue on because that ending was so well written that I wanted to find out what happened. I will say that the writing style of NK Jemisen is a bit more on the poetic side, and poetry writing, or even like poetic typewriting, tends to leave a lot of it to the imagination, or it's intended for a very slow read. It's intended for one of those reads where you like stop and you think about the words that are coming out. And I don't tend to do that very much with my fiction books because that's not why I read fiction, right? Like, I don't read fiction just to like sit and process. So I will say that I think part of it is just like maybe me and NK Jemisin's writing don't mesh as well, but ultimately it was still really beautifully done and I rated it 3 stars. I then read the Obelisk and this one was my favorite. Like, straight out the gate, I understood what was happening. I was super invested. I loved the characters. Also, the chapters were so emotionally heavy that I'd get to the end of the chapter and like need to take a break. Like, I would literally read a chapter and then I would look at my phone. I would read a chapter, I would talk to my kids. I would read a chapter, I would talk to my husband. Like, I needed breaks in between every chapter because just so many things happened. It felt like little micro stories in the midst of this book that were similar to how I felt at the end of the first book. And I was invested from start to finish. On top of that, I feel like all the characters were much more communicative in their points of view for this book and more emotional in the way that they expressed themselves. And I had the best time. Ultimately, I rated the second book 4.25 stars. So then after finishing that second book and just feeling like so invested, so involved, like absolutely just enthralled with it, I was so excited to jump into the Stone Sky, which is the 3rd and final installment of the Broken Earth trilogy. I felt like I had a really good grasp on the world. I understood what was happening. I was there. And while I understood what the world was and what the story was, I did not like this book at all. And the reason why is because they bring in a point of view of one of the characters who sounds and acts very robotically. We have zero emotion. We have very much like just, this is what's happening right now kind of thing. And it completely removed an element of the emotional connection to the story. Like, big things were happening, but the way that they were being described just fell flat for me. I wanted to love this 3rd book so much, and it's such a bummer because it's the ending and I really wanted to just be so invested. I did ultimately appreciate the ending still, and I think, again, she just knows how to wrap up a story so beautifully, especially like a whole series of stories so beautifully. I rated this last book 2.5 stars. Now let's go ahead and get into my Christian review. The first topic I always love to touch on is smut or spice because it's super popular and in a lot of books, and especially fantasy books. And yes, there is some in here. It's specifically in the first book. There actually, I don't think there's like any in the second or third book, but the first book has some relationships and descriptions. But what actually got me is in the first book, there ends up being a throuple. I've never read a book with that before. And listen, I'm not here to tell you how to read your books, but it's just not for me. And so I was like, oh, okay. That's what we're doing now, you know? So that was like really challenging for me. And I was concerned that if it continued into like the other books, if I would feel comfortable reading it. But again, it doesn't continue on. It doesn't continue on in the series. It's just a very small section of the first book that like gives descriptive detail and that it exists. Like I had to reread it because I thought I misunderstood, but that's what happened. The other category is violence or gore. And again, because this is a fantasy and a dystopian fantasy, there is a big amount of violence and gore risk here. But I would say that the gore was actually pretty minimal, maybe because of the way it's written. There are some scenes that are very heavy emotionally and that what happens could be gory or described as gory, but it's not described that way. So I feel like it's really easy to skip over and skip past and not worry about. So that to me is fine. The last category is that magic system, which we had talked about with any fantasy book. I always just kind of love to touch on it. And the magic system in this book is not dark at all. It's very unique. I actually like don't know that I've heard about it or read a book with it before. It's very much focused on like earth and on like pulling from the earth and like energy from the earth. I thought that was super fascinating, but it wasn't necessarily dark or twisted or anything. If anything, I feel like the magic system told a much larger story about treating people who are different than us like poorly. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I do think that this is appropriate for ages 18 and up, mainly because of just the complexity of the writing, but more so than that, the story that's being told and the first book, which had like the throuple in it, just yeah. As always, you can find everything that I'm reading and rating in real time by following me on Goodreads. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, and I do have my own YouTube channel where I do more of like my day-to-day reading stuff. So if you're wanting more of my recaps as they're coming out, as I'm reading them, you can check that out down below. We also want to continue this conversation. We don't want it to end here. So let me know down in the comments below a book you want me to read or what you think of this review. Or you can send us an email at hello@trokia.org. I can't wait to see you on the next one.